In this video, I'm going to dive into everything that I have learnt after starting my writing journey 3 years ago at the age of 31. My goal in creating this video is to help propel other young intuitive writers who are just beginning on their journey into writing, no matter the feelings of failure or perfectionism or idealism that they have to combat. The advice in this video is going to be primarily geared towards writers that are more on the intuitive spectrum like I am, because this is where I have the most experience and this is what I deal with the most. And these are the people that I primarily want to work with or help instruct here on this channel, because I know what it feels like when you're someone who has to rewrite your novel over and over again just to discover what the story even is. So hi, if you're new here, then welcome. My name is Francesca and I'm an aspiring fantasy author. I only really had the courage to begin my writing journey at the age of 31, and I want to create content that leads and encourages and guides other young or budding writers to take the plunge and follow their writer dreams as soon as possible. So having said all of that, let's dive into the advice that I have for you guys as budding intuitive writers. So number one is this. You can make progress in as little as 1 hour per day. So just getting down and writing for 1 hour, whether it be in the morning or in the afternoon, you can go so far with your writing. So we all have so many things getting in the way of our creative passions. And these are some other excuses or reasons I made for myself being an idealist and a perfectionist, thinking that I couldn't write or be creative while I still had a job. That was an excuse that I made for myself. And really, when I think about how far I have come with my writing, now being a mother. So now that I'm a mother to a young child, also pregnant with my second, I realized I actually had a lot more time when I had a job as opposed to now. And it is only now that I decided to take up writing. And many days I only get as little as an hour to write. But in the past 3 years, I have been able to write 2 novels and completely plan out my third. So the first novel is also on draft 6. So this is a novel that I have rewritten many, many times, and I've still been able to make that progress. So I want to encourage you that yes, jobs get in the way, we get drained, toddlers drain us, motherhood, relationships, friends, responsibilities, but you can make a lot of progress in just an hour a day. So if you're especially young, think about how far you can come in the 10 years that I didn't write, when only in 3 years I've been able to make this progress with just an hour a day. So think about that, absorb it. It doesn't have to be your ideal situation. I know we want it to be, and maybe one day we will get there. We're idealists. We want to have a whole day to write and do whatever we want, but that is just not feasible. And if you love writing and it's a passion of yours, don't give up on it just because you can't spend all day on it. At least spend that 1 hour. It makes more sense to do something you love for an hour than to not do it at all. The second piece of advice is that you can't discover what process works best for you until you start writing. So let's just say you are on the intuitive spectrum like I am. Usually, as an intuitive writer, also known as a pantser, you are going to be someone who is just going to have to write to get to the crux of your story, or to develop it, to finish it, to discover it. Now, as you continue to write, you may learn that you fall more onto the intuitive planning spectrum, which is where I have discovered that I am. So I'm actually learning that I'm doing best planning out as much as possible to begin with, then writing whatever I need to kind of get to the parts of the story that I don't know or understand. There are just a lot of things that I have to discover along the way. So after 3 years, I have a process that works much better for me. It's probably going to help me avoid writing an extreme amount of drafts like I have on my first one. I've had to write it 6 times, but after doing all that work, I now know how to be more efficient in the future, if that makes sense. So even if at the beginning it's incredibly frustrating, the amount of time you have to spend, remember that it's not time wasted, because it's all time that is developing your process, where you're learning more about how you write, how to write, and what works best for you. The next piece of advice is that you have to allow yourself to be bad. You have to allow yourself to suck. And I know that this is common advice that we get as writers, but it is true. Once again, you probably are some sort of idealist or perfectionist being a writer, particularly if you're an intuitive writer, and particularly if you are doing more creative and fantasy work. I mean, most of us create fantasy worlds just so we can escape this world where things aren't ideal the way that we want them, right? But the thing is, you can't get to your ideal state. You can't get to your ideal story without putting the work in. That's just the way that it is. You don't have to show anyone your work while it sucks. You don't have to put it out there. I barely showed anyone my work until I was maybe on my 4th draft of my novel. And when I wrote my first draft, look, I knew it sucked, but I was just at that point where I was 31 years old and I was like, I'm not going to withhold my passion from myself anymore just because I'm not that good at it. I would have been so much better by now if I had already started writing back when I wanted to at 16. So you have to go through that process. It's the only way to improve. It's the only way to mastery. Yes, some of us have more talent than others. Some of us are going to be better at ideas. Some of us are going to be better with characters. Some of us are going to be better with plotting. Some of us can just write a whole novel just out of nowhere without any planning at all. But generally, we all have areas where we need to improve, and we can't get there without doing the writing and without allowing ourselves to suck. So please give yourself that grace as a writer. There's nothing wrong with you just because you're not perfect on your first attempt. The next piece of advice I have to all budding intuitive writers is to work on your characters, plan out your characters as much as possible, even if you don't have anything else. So as a pantser, the best thing you can do is at least try to flesh out your characters, their arcs, their fatal flaws, their misbeliefs, their internal conflict, and make that as robust and detailed as possible, because the character arc in itself is going to give you plot, tension, and story development. Where they reach their aha moment and finally grow is something you can work around and develop your plot around. So even if you're finding it difficult to do the world building or the plotting or understanding what happens where, the character arcs alone of your main and side characters are going to give you so much information and be a map or a guide for how to take them on that journey in your story. The next piece of advice is, if you don't know where the story is going, you have to keep writing to discover it. So I will admit now, being in my 3rd year of writing and being on my 6th draft of my first novel, I'm so much better at planning and plotting because I have been doing it for my 3rd novel, my successive novels, and doing it more for this novel on the 6th draft. I just have so much more detailed chapter plans that I go into, overviews, characters, everything like that now, and I have a completely different process. But I never would have figured that out for myself if I didn't go on the journey, right? So I wouldn't have been able to comprehend or understand how to hold that much information in my head and what I needed to hold in my head as a writer to create a story. I didn't know that at the beginning, and I only figured it out through writing. Of course, we will study and learn along the way, but really ultimately it is the work and it is the creation process itself that is the most beneficial to us as writers. So don't stress out if you don't have the ending, if you don't have the midpoint, if you don't know what happens in between. Just write and discover it as you go. Sometimes the story just comes to us in bits and pieces. So look at it as gardening. You're tending to a garden, but we only really get to smell the flowers and enjoy the plants growing much later. So you have to kind of plant the seeds and let them mull in your head over time to allow them to grow and to flourish into final ideas. And that's just the way it is. It's really only after 3 years of continuing to just discover my first novel that I finally feel happy with it. Is it a masterpiece? No, but it's so much better than it was at the beginning, and it's so much more of a complete story that I really have no idea where it came from. Like, it came from God. So it just comes in his own time. It comes in your own time. It comes in the story's time, and you just have to, unfortunately, follow that process so long as it goes. So I have a new favorite quote in regards to this phenomenon. I just recently read the book, The Maps of Imagination, The Writer as Cartographer. And that's a really, really good book to read. It doesn't necessarily give typical advice, but it gives an overall journey of the writer and what we do as writers and what we reveal in certain ways as the maps of our stories and how it affects the readers. And this is just a perfect quote that goes along with this. So it's by Reginald Gibbons, and he says, "The articulation process becomes the knowing. The knowing comes out of the process, and it refuels a further effort of our articulations. A sense of fruitfulness, of rich discoveries, of voyaging comes to us in the exhilarating moments of being in our work in progress." So enjoy the process of discovering your novel. Allow it to unfold in its own time, realizing that every hour spent on it is not an hour wasted, but another hour of improvement and discovering what works best for you and the novel as well. The next piece of advice is to plan as much as possible, then let it go. So unless you are a complete intuitive pantser who's been writing novels for years, and you know, wow, like, I've never needed to plan. I just write it and it's done. That's great. But most of us are going to be able to be much more productive and spend a lot less time with our drafts if we plan. But that in itself cannot hold an intuitive writer up. Don't get held up if you don't know the plan. Plan as much as you can, but then let it go. And also realize that the plan might change. So as you're writing along, usually you're going to discover something else and the whole thing's going to change. So now when that happens, I completely update my plan. I go back and I change things and update the chapters that come after it. So I have a better understanding of how to integrate everything and how to include everything that I need to. But if you can't do that, like I said, you just need to let it go and allow it to happen. And finally, I want to encourage all writers to adapt, change, and improve their process as they go along. So as I said, this is a theme that has been running through all my advice. If you are a budding or new writer, you will probably discover that your process is going to change and improve. And this is a great win, right? Because the more time you spend writing, the more efficient you'll become at it. But don't just stubbornly stick to what you had in the beginning. Just continue to update things with each book or novel. Maybe now you have different scene plans or chapter plans or character profiles that you use. Continue to update them, continue to improve them. And then, use this process as you go along and realize that be fluid. You're probably already fluid as an intuitive writer, but I'm saying use your fluidity and your intuition to your advantage and continue to improve and adapt as you go along. So that would be the main advice that I would give to young and budding new writers of the intuitive spectrum particularly. And in closing, intuitive writing is going to be more about the journey than the destination. And I just want you guys to accept and embrace that reality now, as soon as possible. Don't fight against it. Don't feel like it has to be perfect at the beginning. Just accept it the way that it is and learn how to love the journey, learn how to go along it, and learn how to just adapt and grow and change the novel as it decides to be changed. Having said all that, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below because I would be more than happy to try and answer or give advice to anyone out there who wants to begin their writing journey or is currently on it and looking for some inspiration. And like and subscribe if you can, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.